Hello there, and welcome. There is a word in the Japanese language that cannot be translated into English, not because the language lacks vocabulary, but because it describes something most cultures have forgotten how to feel. The word is Wabi-Sabi, and tonight we are going to spend a long, quiet while together exploring what it means, why it matters so deeply, and how it might gently change the way you see your own life. Because Wabi-Sabi is about the cracks, the worn edges, the fading light. It is about all the places where things are coming apart, or growing old, or falling softly away. And it says, with great tenderness, that those are the most beautiful places of all. Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepy Wisdom Library, a place where thoughtful minds can come to rest. If you have had a long day, if your thoughts have been running in circles, if you have been holding yourself to impossible standards, and you are simply tired of it, I am glad you found your way here tonight. Because this is a gentle place, and the wisdom we are exploring is a gentle wisdom. There is nothing you need to do right now except settle in. Let your shoulders soften. Let your breathing slow. And if somewhere along the way you drift into sleep, that is perfectly fine. The words will still be here when you wake. Tonight, we are going to trace the long, winding story of Wabi-Sabi from its earliest roots in ancient Buddhist philosophy, all the way to its quiet presence in modern psychology and everyday life. We will visit candlelit tea rooms in medieval Japan, where a Zen priest first placed a rough clay bowl on a wooden table and asked his guests to notice its beauty. We will sit beside the poet Matsuo Basho as he listened to the sound of a frog breaking the stillness of an old pond. We will watch golden lacquer fill the cracks of a broken tea bowl in the art of kintsugi. And we will walk through stone gardens in Kyoto, where 15 rocks rest on raked white gravel and no one has ever been able to see them all at once. But more than any of that, we will sit with a question that Wabi-Sabi asks every person who encounters it. And the question is simply this: what if the things you think are wrong with you are actually part of your beauty? To understand Wabi-Sabi, we need to begin where it began, in the philosophical soil of Buddhism. Specifically, in a teaching known as the 3 marks of existence. These are 3 observations about reality that the historical Buddha offered more than 2,500 years ago. They are among the most foundational ideas in all of Buddhist thought, and they serve as the deep roots from which Wabi-Sabi eventually grew. The first mark is impermanence, known in Japanese as mujo. It holds that everything in existence is in a constant state of change. Nothing is fixed. Nothing lasts. The river you step into today is not the river you stepped into yesterday. The body you live in now is not the body you lived in 10 years ago. Every cell, every moment, every feeling is arising and dissolving, always in motion. And this is not a problem to be solved. It is simply the nature of things. The second mark is suffering, or dukkha, which might more accurately be described as dissatisfaction or unease. This does not mean that life is only suffering. It means that when we resist the flow of impermanence, when we try to hold on to things that are already changing, when we cling to what was or grasp at what we want things to become, we create a kind of friction inside ourselves. a quiet ache that follows us through our days. The third mark is the absence of a fixed self, known in Japanese as ku, or emptiness. This is perhaps the most subtle of the three. It suggests that nothing possesses a permanent, independent essence. Everything exists only in relationship to everything else. A flower is not separate from the soil, the rain, the sun, the hand that planted it. You are not separate from the experiences that shaped you, the people who held you, the air you breathe right now. There is no solid, unchanging core at the center of anything. There is only a shimmering web of interdependence, always moving, always becoming. These three insights, impermanence, suffering, and emptiness, form the philosophical foundation of Wabi-Sabi. But what happened over the centuries is remarkable. In Japan, these ideas did not remain abstract doctrines. They became a way of seeing the world, a way of noticing beauty, a way of living. They moved from the monastery into the tea room, from philosophy into art, from the mind into the hands. Let us spend a moment with the words themselves. Wabi and sabi are actually two separate words, each carrying its own weight of meaning, and together they form something that neither could express alone. Wabi originally carried negative connotations. In its earliest use, it referred to the pain of loneliness, the ache of isolation, the sadness of living far from others or lacking what one desires. It described the experience of a person out in the cold, far from comfort, stripped of everything familiar. It was not a pleasant word, but something happened to Wabi around the 14th and 15th centuries. Its meaning began to shift. The hermit who had once been seen as a sad, lonely figure was now viewed as someone wise, someone freed from the distractions of society, someone who had discovered a richness in simplicity that others had overlooked. Wabi came to mean a kind of spiritual fullness found in having less, a contentment discovered not through accumulation, but through letting go. Sabe, on the other hand, carries the meaning of aging, of time's passage, of the patina that forms on a surface after years of exposure to the elements. The word is related to the idea of rust, of things becoming old and worn. Sabi is the green moss that creeps slowly across a stone lantern. It is the fading color of a silk garment that has been washed many times. It is the soft groove worn into a wooden threshold by decades of footsteps. Sabi finds beauty not in newness, but in evidence of a life lived. It sees the wear and the weathering and says, yes, this is where the story is. When these two words come together as Wabi-Sabi, they create a world view that is difficult to pin down in any other language. The author, Richard Powell, summarized it with 3 observations that have become a kind of shorthand. Nothing lasts, nothing is finished, and nothing is perfect. And yet, Wabi-Sabi is not a philosophy of despair. It does not mourn the passing of things. It celebrates the passing of things. It looks at the fallen petal, the cracked wall, the wrinkled face, and finds in each of them a beauty that could not exist without the presence of time and change. The story of how Wabi-Sabi moved from Buddhist philosophy into the daily culture of Japan begins quite beautifully with tea. In the 15th century, the Japanese tea ceremony was a lavish affair. Wealthy aristocrats and powerful warlords used it as a display of their status. They served tea in rooms filled with expensive Chinese ceramics, porcelain of perfect form and flawless glaze. objects designed to demonstrate refinement and wealth. The tea ceremony had become a performance of power. Then a Zen priest named Murata Juko, who lived from 1423 to 1502, did something extraordinary. He began to serve tea in small, humble rooms. Instead of the polished Chinese ceramics that were fashionable at the time, he introduced rough, simple instruments, wooden utensils, clay bowls made by local craftsmen, objects that were plain, even crude, by the standards of the day. And he asked his guests to find beauty in them. Juko was deeply influenced by his study of Zen under the renowned monk Rikyu Sojun, who served as abbot of the great temple of Daitoku-ji in Kyoto. Through Rikyu, Juko came to believe that the taste of Zen and the taste of tea were one and the same, and that the tea ceremony could be more than a social event. He saw it as a path, a spiritual practice, a way of cultivating presence and humility. In a famous letter known as the Kokoro no Fumi, or letter from the heart, Juko described what he felt were the worst faults of the way of tea: pride and attachment. He also said something that resonates deeply with the spirit of Wabi-Sabi, that the moon partly hidden behind clouds is more moving than the full moon shining in a clear sky, that the incompleteness of the view is what makes the heart ache with appreciation. Juko set the tea room at 4.5 tatami mats, about 10 square meters, far smaller than the grand halls that had been used before. He championed the harmonizing of fine Chinese tea utensils with humble, imperfect Japanese ones, arguing that beginners should start with Chinese pieces in order to fully appreciate the beauty of simpler Japanese wares. He was, in many ways, planting the seeds of what would later bloom into a full philosophy. His student, Takeno Ju, who lived from 1502 to 1555, carried this vision further. A wealthy merchant from the port city of Sakai, Ju took up the study of tea ceremony from Juko's disciples and stripped away even more of the ornamentation, replacing lacquer and white paper walls with plain wood. Accounts of Ju's philosophy suggest that he valued a spirit of honest self-restraint and integrity, living one's life without extravagance. And it was Ju who began to use the concept of wabi more explicitly in connection with the practice of tea. But it was a man born in 1522 in the port city of Sakai who would transform Wabi-Sabi from a quiet aesthetic preference into one of the most enduring philosophies in Japanese history. His name was Sen no Rikyu, and he is still considered the greatest tea master who ever lived. Rikyu was born into a merchant family and showed an early interest in both the Buddhist arts and the emerging practice of the tea ceremony. He studied under Takeno Ju, inheriting the growing tradition of wabi-cha, or the rustic style of tea. He also underwent Zen training, spending time at both Nanshuji Temple in his home city of Sakai and at Daitoku-ji in Kyoto, the same temple where Juko's master Rikyu had once served as abbot. And from these twin streams of influence, Zen discipline and tea artistry, Rikyu forged something deeply original. He became the private tea master to Oda Nobunaga, one of the most powerful warlords of the Sengoku period, the era of the Warring States, beginning in 1579 when Rikyu was 58 years old. When Nobunaga was killed in the Honnoji incident of 1582, Rikyu entered the service of his successor, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who was arguably the most powerful man in all of Japan. It was under Hideyoshi's patronage that Rikyu gained unmatched influence over the world of tea. And what did he do with that influence? He made everything smaller, simpler, more honest. Rikyu designed tea rooms that were barely 2 tatami mats in size, roughly 6 feet square. The entrance was so low that every guest, no matter how powerful, had to remove their sword and crawl through on their hands and knees. This was a profound act of deliberate humility. Even the emperor would have to bow to enter. The message was unmistakable. In this space, all are equal. In this space, rank means nothing. Only presence matters. Inside these tiny rooms, Rikyu served tea using the simplest possible utensils. He favored bamboo containers he had cut himself. He worked with a tile maker named Shojiro to create a new kind of tea bowl, hand-molded from rough, porous red clay, finished in either matte black or deep red glaze. These bowls were not thrown on a wheel, which would have given them a symmetrical, uniform shape. They were shaped by hand, between the palms, so that each one was slightly irregular, slightly different, carrying the subtle imprint of the maker's touch. They came to be known as rakuwar, from the Japanese character meaning enjoyment. And they became the physical embodiment of wabi-sabi in ceramics. Simple, unadorned, warm to the touch, full of quiet presence. Rikyu stripped away all unnecessary movement from the ceremony itself. Every gesture was reduced to its essence. There was nothing extra, nothing decorative, nothing that served vanity or display. He wanted the tea room to feel like what he called a grass-thatched hermitage, a place where the noise of the world fell away, and all that remained was the warmth of the bowl in your hands, the green froth of the matcha, and the quiet attention of the moment. The 4 principles he established for the tea ceremony, harmony, respect, purity, and tranquility, became the moral architecture of the practice. And they remain so today, more than 400 years later, passed down through 3 family schools that all trace their lineage directly back to Rikyu. But Rikyu's story does not end peacefully. His patron, Hideyoshi, was a man of enormous appetites and enormous ego. He had a golden tea room built with gilded walls and golden tea utensils, the precise opposite of everything Rikyu stood for. Over time, tensions grew between the 2 men. The true reasons remain debated by historians to this day. One well-known account holds that Rikyu had contributed funds to rebuild the upper story of the Great Gate at Daitokuji, and in gratitude, the temple placed a wooden statue of him there. When Hideyoshi discovered it, he was reportedly furious at the idea that he would have to pass beneath Rikyu's likeness whenever he entered the temple. Others suggest that Hideyoshi, who had risen from peasant origins to become the ruler of Japan, may have grown jealous of Rikyu's vast cultural influence, or that political enemies whispered against the tea master. Whatever the cause, in 1591, Hideyoshi ordered Rikyu to commit ritual suicide. According to the account passed down by the tea master Okakura Kakuzo, Rikyu held one final exquisite tea ceremony, presenting each guest with a piece of the equipment as a souvenir, all except the bowl, which he shattered, declaring that a cup touched by the lips of misfortune should never be used again. He then composed a death poem addressed to the blade that would take his life, and ended his life in the manner of a samurai. He was 70 years old. His death was a profound loss, but his philosophy endured. In many ways, it grew stronger after he was gone. His descendants founded the three great schools of tea ceremony, the Omoto-senka, Ura-senka, and Mushakoji-senka, and through their teaching, the principles of Wabi-Sabi spread throughout Japanese culture for centuries to come. Over the centuries, the philosophy of Wabi-Sabi crystallized into a set of aesthetic principles that offer a kind of quiet guide for seeing beauty in the world. In Zen thought, 7 principles are often associated with the Wabi-Sabi worldview. Each one describes a quality found in nature and, by extension, a quality that can be cultivated in the human spirit. The first is fukinsei, which means asymmetry or irregularity. In many cultures, symmetry is considered the standard of beauty. Clean lines, even proportions, balanced compositions. But in the Wabi-Sabi view, true beauty lies in the slight imbalance, the off-center arrangement, the thing that is not quite even, a branch that grows crookedly toward the light, a stone that sits at an unexpected angle, a tea bowl whose rim undulates softly rather than forming a perfect circle. Fukinsei reminds us that nature itself is never perfectly symmetrical, and that there is a deeper harmony in asymmetry than in forced balance. The second is kanso, meaning simplicity. This is the principle of stripping away everything that is unnecessary to reveal the essence of a thing. It is not minimalism for the sake of style. It is clarity achieved through omission. A haiku poem of only 17 syllables. A Zen garden of only stone and raked gravel. A tea room containing nothing but a hanging scroll and a single flower. Kanso teaches that when we remove distraction, what remains is more vivid, more alive, more deeply felt. The third is koko, which translates roughly as austere beauty, or the beauty of the ancient and weathered. Koko is the dignity that comes with age, the warmth of a very old wooden beam, darkened and polished by generations of hands. The quiet grace of a temple roof spotted with lichen. Koko asks us to look at what has endured, what has been shaped by time rather than protected from it, and to recognize the deep beauty that lives there. The fourth principle is shizen, meaning naturalness. Shizen values things that are without pretense, things that arise from their own nature rather than being forced into an imposed form. A garden that allows plants to grow according to their own inclination. A piece of pottery that shows the natural color and texture of the clay from which it was made. Shizen does not mean wildness or chaos. It means authenticity. It means letting a thing be fully and honestly itself. The fifth is yugen, one of the most elusive concepts in all of Japanese aesthetics. It means a subtle, profound grace that is not immediately obvious. Yugen is what you feel when you look at a mountain half hidden in mist, or when you watch the last light of evening settle over a quiet lake. It is a beauty that cannot be fully grasped or explained, only felt. It is the sense that there is something deeper beneath the surface, something that draws you in and keeps you wondering. The sixth is datsuzoku, which means freedom from convention. This principle encourages a spirit of creative surprise, of breaking from the expected pattern in a way that awakens attention. In the tea ceremony, it might mean placing a wildflower in a bamboo vase where a guest expected a formal arrangement. In daily life, it might mean taking an unfamiliar path, saying something unplanned, allowing yourself to step outside the roles you normally play. And the seventh principle is seishaku, meaning tranquility or stillness. This is the deep quiet that comes when the mind settles and the world grows calm. Seishaku is not the absence of sound, it is a presence of peace. It is what you feel when you sit alone in a garden at dawn, or when you hold a warm cup of tea and simply breathe. Seijaku is the stillness from which all creative energy arises and to which it returns. Perhaps no single art form expresses the spirit of Wabi-Sabi more vividly than kintsugi, the ancient Japanese practice of repairing broken pottery with lacquer mixed with powdered gold, silver, or platinum. The word itself means golden joinery, and the practice is as philosophical as it is practical. The origin of kintsugi is surrounded by a well-known story, though scholars note that the details have likely been embellished over the centuries. According to the most popular account, in the late 15th century, during the Muromachi period, the shogun Ashikaga Yoshimasa sent a favorite Chinese celadon tea bowl, which had developed cracks, back to China, hoping for a replacement or repair. When the bowl returned, it had been mended with crude metal staples. What happened next depends on which version of the story you encounter. In some tellings, Yoshimasa was disappointed with the unsightly repair and asked Japanese craftsmen to find a more beautiful solution. In others, the stapled bowl itself became celebrated, its large metal clamps seen as a badge of character, even earning the bowl its own name, bakuhan, meaning large locust clamp. What seems clear is that sometime around this period, Japanese artisans began developing the technique we now know as kintsugi. Using urushi, the natural lacquer harvested from the Japanese lacquer tree, they bound broken pieces back together. And then, rather than hiding the cracks, they dusted them with powdered gold, making the lines of breakage the most striking feature of the entire piece. Think about what that means for a moment. In most traditions, when something breaks, we try to hide the evidence. We glue it invisibly. We paint over the seam. We want the object to look as though it was never damaged at all. Kintsugi does the opposite. It illuminates the damage. It celebrates the history of the object by making its wounds visible and beautiful. The golden lines become rivers of light running across the surface of the bowl, and the repaired piece often becomes more valued than it was before it was broken. By the 17th century, collectors had become so drawn to kintsugi that, according to some accounts, there were those who were accused of deliberately breaking valuable pottery so it could be repaired with golden seams. Whether or not such tales were exaggerated, the sentiment speaks to a remarkable shift in values. The practice had moved beyond mere restoration and become a form of art in its own right. Kintsugi is deeply connected to several important Japanese philosophical concepts. There is Wabi-Sabi itself, the embrace of imperfection and impermanence. There is also mottainai, which expresses a feeling of regret when something is wasted, a sense that objects deserve respect and care. And there is mushin, sometimes translated as no mind, a concept from Zen that encompasses acceptance of change, non-attachment, and the ability to exist fully in the present moment. In recent years, kintsugi has become a powerful metaphor in psychology and therapeutic practice. Clinicians use it to help people reframe their relationship with trauma and loss. The idea is simple but profound. Your breaks are not the end of your story. They can become the most meaningful part. the golden seam is not a sign of weakness. It is evidence of survival. And the repaired vessel, like the repaired life, is stronger and more beautiful for having been broken and mended with care. If kintsugi brought wabi-sabi into the world of objects, then haiku brought it into the world of words. And the poet most responsible for weaving wabi-sabi into the fabric of Japanese literature was Matsuo Basho, born in 1644 near the city of Ueno, in what is now Mie Prefecture. Basho was the son of a family of samurai descent, though by his father's time, the family's status had diminished. Some accounts suggest his father was a low-ranking samurai who supplemented his income through farming and teaching calligraphy. As a young man, he entered the service of a local lord's son, Todo Yoshitada, and the two shared a deep love of poetry. When Yoshitada died suddenly in 1666, Basho left this service and eventually settled in Edo, modern-day Tokyo, where he began to establish his reputation as a poet. His students planted a Japanese banana tree, a basho, in the garden of his small hut, and he took its name as his own. What made Basho's haiku extraordinary was his ability to distill profound feeling into the briefest of forms. A haiku consists of just 17 syllables arranged in 3 lines. There's no room for explanation or elaboration. Every word must carry immense weight. And Basho believed that this compression was itself a spiritual practice. He sought what he called karumi, or lightness, the feeling that a poem had been composed by a child or by nature itself, without effort or pretension. His most famous poem captures the essence of wabi-sabi in a single breath. An old pond. A frog leaps in, the sound of water. That is the entire poem. An ancient, still body of water. A small, sudden movement. A sound that breaks the silence and then is absorbed back into it. The poem offers no interpretation, no commentary, no moral. It simply places you in the moment and lets you feel what is there. The stillness, the surprise, the way the sound dissolves back into quiet. It is a poem about impermanence compressed into the space between 2 heartbeats. Another well-known poem of his reads, "Summer grasses, all that remains of warriors' dreams." He wrote this while visiting the site of a famous battle in northern Japan, where once there had been armies and ambition, clashing swords and desperate courage. Now there was only grass. Tall, green, indifferent grass growing over the ruins of human aspiration. The poem does not judge or lament, it observes. And in its observation, there is a tenderness that goes straight to the heart. Basho traveled extensively on foot through Japan, writing poetry as he went. His journeys were themselves a form of wabi-sabi practice, a voluntary simplicity, a willingness to live with very little, to be open to whatever the road offered. He sought what he called sabi in his poems, a quality of contented solitude, a beauty that could only be felt in quietness. And he sought wabi, the spiritual richness of simplicity, the deep satisfaction that comes from needing less. He is attributed with a famous instruction to his students. Do not follow in the footsteps of the old masters. Seek what they sought. Whether or not these exact words were his, the spirit behind them carries the whole essence of wabi-sabi within it. Do not copy the form. Find the feeling. Do not imitate the surface. Touch the depth. Another profound expression of wabi-sabi can be found in the dry landscape gardens of Japan, known as karasansui, or more commonly, Zen rock gardens. These gardens use only the simplest of materials, stone, gravel, and occasionally moss, to create spaces of deep contemplation. Perhaps the most famous of all is the rock garden at Ryoan-ji, a Zen Buddhist temple in the northwest of Kyoto. The garden is a rectangular space measuring roughly 31 meters by 15 meters, bordered on 3 sides by a low clay wall stained with age. On the 4th side sits the wooden veranda of the temple, where visitors kneel to observe. Within this enclosed space, 15 stones of various shapes and sizes are arranged in 5 groups on a bed of immaculately raked, white gravel. Each stone sits on its own small island of moss, and the gravel is combed into clean, flowing lines each day by the temple's monks. There is something remarkable about this garden that reveals the spirit of Wabi-Sabi in a very direct way. No matter where you sit on the veranda, no matter how you shift your position, you can never see all 15 stones at the same time. At least one is always hidden from view. Whether this was the original designer's conscious intention remains a matter of scholarly debate, since neither the creator's identity nor the garden's intended meaning has ever been confirmed. But the effect itself is undeniable, and many who have contemplated the arrangement have drawn the same conclusion. The garden seems to be telling you something about the nature of reality. That completeness is always just beyond reach, that there is always something you cannot see, and that this incompleteness is not a flaw. It may, in fact, be part of the design. The clay walls of the garden are themselves works of wabi-sabi. Made from clay, boiled in natural oils, they have darkened and stained over the centuries into subtle tones of brown and orange. You can see the effects of weather, the marks of time, the places where the surface has cracked and been softened by rain. Visitors have noted a scar where a door appears to have been removed long ago, and no effort has been made to conceal it. These imperfections are not signs of neglect. They are embraced as part of the garden's beauty, evidence of the centuries that have passed since the stones were first placed. Garden historian Gunter Nitschke wrote that the rock garden at Ryoan-ji does not symbolize anything. It does not reproduce a natural scene. It is, he said, an abstract composition of natural objects in space, a composition whose function is to incite meditation. And that is perhaps the most wabi-sabi statement one could make about a garden. It exists not to represent something else, but to bring you into the present moment, to help you sit with what is, without the need to name or explain it. If we are speaking of wabi-sabi and impermanence, we must also speak of the cherry blossom, or sakura. Every spring, for a few breathtaking weeks, the cherry trees of Japan burst into bloom. Cities and parks and temple grounds are suddenly overwhelmed with soft clouds of white and pink, and the entire country pauses to notice. This annual ritual of flower viewing is called hanami, and it has been practiced for well over 1,000 years. But here is what makes the cherry blossom so central to the Japanese understanding of beauty. The blossoms last only about a week, sometimes even less. They appear in a rush of color and fragrance. They reach their peak, and then they begin to fall. Petals drift through the air like snow, gathering in soft drifts along pathways and on the surface of ponds. Within days, the trees are bare again. This brevity is not considered tragic. It is considered the very source of the blossom's beauty. The Japanese have a phrase for this feeling, mono no aware, which is often translated as the pathos of things, or an empathy toward things. It describes a bittersweet awareness that everything is passing, not just a general awareness, but a feeling, an ache, a tenderness that rises in the chest when you stand beneath a tree full of petals and know that tomorrow they will be gone. The 18th century literary scholar Motoori Norinaga, who brought the concept of mono no aware to the center of Japanese literary criticism, believed that this sensitivity to impermanence was itself a form of knowledge. To know mono no aware, he wrote, is to discern the power and essence, not just of the moon and the cherry blossoms, but of every single thing existing in this world, and to be stirred by each of them. He saw it not as sentimentality, but as a way of being awake to reality. A person who feels mono no aware is a person who is paying attention. Cherry blossoms embody Wabi-Sabi because they are the perfect expression of beauty that is imperfect, impermanent, and incomplete. They bloom unevenly. Their petals are fragile. Their moment of glory is almost impossibly short. And yet every year, millions of people gather beneath them, setting out blankets, sharing food and drink, simply sitting in the presence of something beautiful that is already leaving. It is one of the most honest celebrations of life's transience anywhere in the world. Wabi-Sabi breathes through many other forms of Japanese art and culture as well. In Ikebana, the Japanese art of flower arrangement, the emphasis is on asymmetry, on the spaces between the stems, on the single branch chosen for its natural grace rather than its perfection. A wilted leaf might be left in place, a bent stalk allowed to curve as it will. The arrangement is meant to evoke the natural world in all its unpolished honesty. In bonsai, the cultivation of miniature trees, the most prized specimens are those that show signs of age and weathering. Rough, textured bark, dead wood sections where branches have broken away, hollow trunks. These features are not flaws to be corrected, but are deliberately preserved and even enhanced, because they tell the story of the tree's long, patient existence. A bonsai is often most admired in autumn or winter, when its leaves have fallen and the bare architecture of its branches is revealed. In Honkyoku, the traditional music of the wandering Zen monks who played the shakuhachi bamboo flute, the aim was not technical perfection, but something closer to breath itself. The breathy, slightly rough tone of the shakuhachi was prized precisely because it captured the quality of air passing through bamboo. Each note carried within it the sound of its own impermanence. And in the celebrated essay, In Praise of Shadows, written in 1933 by the novelist Junichiro Tanizaki, the author reflects on the way Japanese aesthetics favor dimness, subtlety, and the play of shadow over brightness and clarity. He writes lovingly of dark lacquerware gleaming faintly in candlelight, of rooms where the walls recede into soft obscurity, of a beauty that emerges only when things are not fully illuminated. This, too, is Wabi-Sabi, the understanding that mystery has its own kind of grace, and that some things are more beautiful when they are partly hidden. While Wabi-Sabi is uniquely Japanese in its expression, the insights it carries resonate with wisdom traditions around the world. In Taoism, the ancient Chinese philosophy that deeply influenced Zen Buddhism, there is a central emphasis on naturalness, harmony, and the acceptance of constant change. The Tao Te Ching, attributed to the sage Laozi, is filled with imagery of water wearing away stone, of the uncarved block that holds more potential than any finished object, of the usefulness of emptiness. The Taoist ideal of Wu Wei, which can be translated as effortless action or acting in accordance with the natural flow, shares much with the Wabi-Sabi principle of Shizen, naturalness without pretense. In the Western philosophical tradition, the Stoics of ancient Greece and Rome offered their own counsel on impermanence. The Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, writing in his private meditations, reminded himself again and again that all things are passing. Of human life, he wrote, "The time is a point, and the substance is in a flux." He urged himself to look at each moment clearly without attachment, and to find equanimity in the knowledge that nothing remains the same. There is a quiet kinship between this stoic acceptance and the Wabi-Sabi embrace of transience. In the Christian contemplative tradition, there is a concept known as kenosis, which means self-emptying. It is the idea of releasing attachment to one's own will, one's need for control, and opening instead to a deeper presence. The contemplative writers, such as Meister Eckhart in the 14th century, spoke of the beauty of simplicity and of a poverty of spirit that wasn't deprivation, but a form of spiritual wealth. While the cultural context is very different, the underlying movement is similar, letting go of the unnecessary in order to touch something essential. In the Kabbalistic tradition of Jewish mysticism, there is a concept called Shevirat HaKalim, the breaking of the vessels. It teaches that at the beginning of creation, divine light was poured into vessels that could not contain it, and those vessels shattered. Sparks of that original light became scattered and hidden throughout the world. The work of repair, called tikkun, is the ongoing process of gathering those sparks and restoring wholeness. There is a striking echo of kintsugi in this image. The idea that brokenness is not a catastrophe, but a beginning, that the scattered pieces carry something luminous, and that the act of mending is sacred. These traditions approach the theme from different directions and with different language, but they share a common intuition that clinging to permanence creates suffering, that simplicity opens a door to depth, and that the broken and the incomplete are not less worthy of reverence than the whole and the perfect. In our modern world, the principles of Wabi-Sabi have begun to find a powerful new home in psychology and mental health. And the reason is not hard to understand. We live in a culture that relentlessly promotes perfection. Social media presents us with curated images of flawless lives. Advertising tells us that happiness is always one purchase away. The pressure to be productive, to optimize, to present a polished version of ourselves at all times creates a chronic state of anxiety that many people carry without even realizing it. Perfectionism, which is so often rewarded by our culture, is consistently linked in psychological research with anxiety, depression, low self-worth, and chronic stress. When we believe we must be perfect to be worthy of love, when we feel that our flaws must be hidden or corrected before we can fully belong, we place ourselves in a prison that has no key. Because perfection, by its very nature, is unattainable. Wabi-Sabi offers a different path. It aligns closely with what modern psychology calls self-compassion, a concept developed extensively by researcher Kristen Neff. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with the same kindness you would offer a good friend, recognizing that suffering and imperfection are part of the shared human experience, and maintaining a balanced awareness of your feelings rather than over-identifying with them. In other words, it is the emotional practice of what Wabi-Sabi teaches aesthetically, that imperfection is not something to be overcome, but something to be understood and honored. Wabi-Sabi also connects deeply with the concept of psychological flexibility, which researchers have identified as a key component of emotional resilience. Psychological flexibility is the ability to be present, to open up to difficult feelings, and to take action guided by values rather than by the need to avoid discomfort. When we adopt a Wabi-Sabi perspective, we practice this flexibility naturally. We allow things to be as they are. We stop fighting the current of change and learn to move with it. The kintsugi metaphor has become especially important in therapeutic settings. Clinicians help people see their difficult experiences not as damage to be concealed, but as chapters in a story that is still being written. Research on what is called post-traumatic growth shows that people who have endured great difficulty sometimes emerge with an expanded capacity for appreciation, deeper relationships, a stronger sense of personal strength, new possibilities, and a richer spiritual or philosophical understanding of life. The golden seams of kintsugi are not just a poetic image. They describe a real psychological process, the integration of pain into a life that is deeper and more beautiful for having been broken and repaired. So how does one bring Wabi-Sabi into the fabric of everyday life? Not as an aesthetic trend or a decorating style, but as a genuine shift in how you see yourself and the world around you. It begins with noticing. Take a moment, perhaps tomorrow morning, to look at something old and worn in your home. A cup with a chip in the rim, a book with a cracked spine, a sweater that has faded from many washings. Instead of seeing these as things that need to be replaced, see them as things that have lived with you. They carry your history. They have been part of your mornings, your evenings, your quiet moments. Their imperfections are evidence of use, of presence, of a life that is being lived rather than merely curated. It continues with gentleness toward yourself. The wrinkles on your face are not flaws. They are the marks left by every expression you have ever made, every smile, every moment of concern, every time you squinted into the sun or laughed until your sides ached. The scars on your body tell the story of where you have been. The mistakes in your past are part of the soil from which your present self has grown. Wabi-Sabi does not ask you to pretend these things are not there. It asks you to look at them clearly and to recognize their beauty. It also means slowing down. Wabi-Sabi is, at its heart, an invitation to presence. It asks you to stop rushing past the world and to notice what is actually here. The way light falls through a window in the late afternoon, the smell of rain on dry pavement, the sound of wind in the leaves of a tree you have walked past 100 times without hearing. These are the moments that Wabi-Sabi treasures, the small, unremarkable moments that contain, if we are paying attention, a quiet and astonishing beauty. It means accepting that you are, and always will be, a work in progress. You are not finished. You are not meant to be finished. You are meant to be growing, changing, aging, learning, failing, trying again. The medieval Japanese monk and former courtier Yoshida Kenko, writing in his Essays in Idleness, between 1330 and 1332, gave voice to this feeling with unforgettable clarity. He wrote, "If man were never to fade away like the dews of Adashino, never to vanish like the smoke over Toribeyama, how things would lose their power to move us." And he offered what may be the most Wabi-Sabi sentence ever written. The most precious thing in life is its uncertainty. For those of you listening tonight who know what it is to feel too much, to think too deeply, to lie awake turning things over in your mind long after the rest of the world has gone quiet, Wabi-Sabi has something especially important to say to you. Sensitivity is not a defect. It is a form of depth. The same quality that makes you vulnerable to overwhelm is the quality that allows you to notice the play of light on water, to feel the ache in a piece of music, to understand another person's pain without being told. It is the same quality that Motori Norinaga described when he spoke of mono no aware, the deep capacity to be stirred by the things of this world. You're not too much. You're deeply attuned. And overthinking, that exhausting habit of replaying and analyzing and second-guessing, can be understood through the lens of Wabi-Sabi as a kind of grasping after certainty. We overthink because we want to control outcomes, to predict what will happen, to find the perfect response or the right answer or the guaranteed safe path. Wabi-Sabi gently asks, what if there is no perfect response? What if the right answer changes depending on the day? What if safety is not found in certainty, but in the willingness to meet each moment as it comes? This is not easy counsel. It asks a great deal, but it also offers a great deal in return. Because when you stop demanding perfection of yourself, something softens inside. When you allow yourself to be unfinished, a space opens up. You become lighter. The weight of all those impossible expectations lifts, even a little, and in the space that opens, there is room to breathe, room to rest, room, perhaps, to sleep. So as you lie here now, wherever you are, wrapped in whatever warmth is near you, let the spirit of Wabi-Sabi settle around you like a soft, worn blanket. You do not need to be perfect tonight. You do not need to have the answers. You do not need to fix anything, solve anything, or become anything other than what you already are. You are a work in progress, and that is the most beautiful thing you could be. You carry the marks of your living, the scars of your losses, the fine lines of your laughter and your worry, and every one of those marks is a golden seam. Every one of them tells a story of survival, of endurance, of a heart that has been broken and has chosen again and again to go on beating. Think of the old pond in Basho's poem, still, patient, holding the sky in its surface. And then the frog leaps, and the sound of water fills the silence, and the surface ripples, and then the stillness returns. That is your life. Moments of disruption, moments of stillness, an ongoing rhythm of arrival and departure, of breaking and mending, of falling asleep and waking up. Nothing lasts. Nothing is finished. Nothing is perfect. And that is what makes everything so unutterably precious. Let your eyes close now if they haven't already. Let your thoughts soften like petals falling from a branch. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the quiet of the night. And know that you are held, just as you are, in a world that has always found its deepest beauty in the imperfect, the impermanent, and the incomplete. If this quiet exploration has brought you peace tonight, or if it has helped you see yourself or the world a little more gently, I would be grateful if you would like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one sleepy soul at a time. And if you are still awake, there are more gentle journeys waiting for you in the videos nearby. But for now, there is nothing more you need to do. Let the wisdom of Wabi-Sabi carry you softly into sleep. Good night.